Joining me now from New York City is Ambassador Richard Butler, who has held numerous international posts for both the government of Australia as well as for the United Nations during his 40-year career. Ambassador Butler was responsible for direct negotiations with Saddam Hussein's government to destroy and remove Iraq's weapons of mass destruction after the first Gulf War. Ambassador Butler, thank you for joining us here on The Heat. Pleasure to have you on the broadcast.
Pleasure to be here, Mike.
Let me ask you, now that there's a framework, you've been through this drill before. Syria's agreed to destroy or give up its chemical weapons. What happens next?
First thing that needs to happen, and is happening today, is that Syria has to declare to the Chemical Weapons Organization in The Hague its complete holdings of chemical weapons and the means of manufacturing them. That's the first and indispensable step. After that, inspectors will go to Syria to verify the accuracy of that declaration. I suspect, Mike, that that whole process is going to take a few months, and that's breathtakingly short time. And then once there's a kind of clear picture of the magnitude of the task, they will start to destroy or remove Syria's chemical weapons.
There are a lot of naysayers out there that say, oh, this is going to be a cat and mouse game and on and on and on. But your last report to the Security Council in 1999, you basically said that Saddam Hussein's weapons were accounted for, correct? So this process can work.
Oh, absolutely. And I thank you for putting the question in those terms. I've been talking quite a bit about this current problem to many people in the last few weeks, and I've been hesitant in saying, look, we've been there before, we did this in Iraq, you know, etc., lest it sound boastful or obscure the differences that exist between the Iraq situation and the situation now in Syria. And I'll say straight away there's a major difference, which is a war is taking place inside Syria. But, Mike, I have to take the opportunity to say, yes, it can be done. We did it. With Iraq, with difficulty. There were delays, there was hiding of things, there was obfuscation and so on. But as you point out, in my last report to the Security Council, I was able to say that elementally we had followed the Security Council's mandate, which, and I quote, was to destroy, remove or render harmless all of Iraq's weapons of mass destruction. And when I reported to the Council that we had done that, I said, however, there are a few chemical weapons that are unaccounted for. We thought they existed because we saw the production documents. But I made clear that the amount was small. We didn't really know what had happened to them. There was a report at the time that Iraq had shipped them to Syria, believe it or not. But basically, we had destroyed or removed or rendered harmless Iraq's capability. With difficulty, but we got there. That's why I think it can be done again.
I want to talk a little bit more about the weapons, but I want to also talk to you a little bit about President Obama's speech, because I saw an interview with you where you said Obama was extensively confused. What was confusing about his speech in your sense?
What I was focusing on was the fact that twice in his speech he said, look, we don't want to be the world's policeman. But I think I said there is a sense in which the speech was saying, please give me my badge and gun. And I don't mean to be rude or critical of the President. I think he's been striving very hard to reach a new level of cooperation around this Syria chemical weapons issue, cooperation with Russia and then the United Nations system. What I was reflecting on is this, that the debate within the United States too often is characterized by what military solutions will there be to a problem. We need to go out there and shoot someone down or take a military action that will solve a problem, as if you are the policeman on the beat. And, you know, that's not a view that's shared around the world. As you know very well, very substantial numbers of people in the world don't want the United States to play that role. But now I'm going to get a bit sharper and go a bit further. Nor has it got a right to. It has no right to interfere in the affairs of any other country. It has no right to use force other than in self-defense or at the agreement of the Security Council that force is required to preserve international peace and security. And the actions that have been taken in recent decades against those rules, and those rules apply to everyone, by the way. They apply to Russia, they apply to China. That's what the Charter of the UN says, and they have a point. But steps that have been taken, such as the invasion of Iraq, where those rules were broken, have come to a bad end. And I suppose I was trying to give expression, really in a sense, in support of the President, who says he doesn't want to be the world's policeman. I was trying to give support to that by saying, well, don't ask for the badge.
Well,
don't do it. Do what they're now doing, which is sending an important matter to the United Nations.
Well, I want to get back to the chemical weapons, but I want to also kind of amplify on what you were talking about, because one of the other things that came out in his speech was the American exceptionalism. And Hans Blix, as you well know, the UN inspector, said, well, you know, actually, he wanted to talk about American arrogance, and that is to ignore UN inspectors in the Security Council. And I think that's getting at the heart of what you're saying, and it has been one of the positions of the United States. So you see the president's move in this direction to go a more diplomatic approach as a positive sign.
Oh, absolutely. Look, the agreement that was done in Geneva is a model agreement. I'm not going to bore people by going into the detail, but I'll make this clear. It's a model legally, it's a model technically, and it's a model politically. And the legal and political part of it is this. Here's the United States and Russia as two permanent members of the Security Council getting together and cooperating in a way that they found it rather difficult to do in recent years. And they're cooperating with respect to upholding international law against the use of chemical weapons. And they've set out a procedure to get rid of Syria's chemical weapons in a way that is absolutely consistent with the Chemical Weapons Convention and the role of the Security Council. As I said a moment ago, in a sense, they're kicking this back to the United Nations, to the whole notion of states working together, not working against each other, but working together to solve a problem. And that's what should be happening. I would love to see American leadership exercise not around some notion of exceptionalism or always asking the question, what military power can we use to solve a foreign policy problem, which is a terrible confusion. On the whole, you can't solve foreign policy problems by using military power, but show real leadership by saying, look, there is the law, there is the underlying insistence of the United Nations Charter that states should cooperate together and solve their problems. And the US is going to lead in that direction. I think the world would cheer, quite frankly. And I think in his own way, that's what President Obama, leave the speech aside, I was a bit discontent with those elements I mentioned, but in his own way, that's exactly what President Obama is doing. He and the Russians he and Putin are talking with each other. Russians and America formed this agreement in Geneva. Its ultimate destination is at the Security Council, and whatever action is taken, if Syria starts to slip and slide, will now be through the collective system of the United Nations, and that's where it should be.
Ambassador, we don't have a lot more time. I want to get in a couple more questions. One, chemical stockpile, they're saying the target is mid-2014 for it to be destroyed. Is that realistic?
You know, I suspect it's a bit tight, to say the least, but I'm not going to sweat that. If we see Syria, as it's starting to do, as I said today, declare its holdings and that the process gets underway, I think we should all be vigilant about cheating and so on, but we should be happy that the process is starting and do all that we can, politically and diplomatically, to push it forward and keep it going. And if that's visible and everything's not wound up by June 2014, I don't think people are going to lose too much sleep over it, as long as it keeps moving forward.
The UN found evidence of the nerve agent sarin in Syria. But is there any way to know who used it? I know that there's been a lot of people saying, oh, it's the Syrian government, but we know in 1995 in the Tokyo subway case, it was not a government, it was a terrorist action. So there is the possibility, and in fact, there's been intelligence sources, unnamed, who've said this is not a slam dunk.
Right. What we do know is that sarin was used, and that's illegal. In fact, it's a crime against humanity. What we don't know for certain is who did it. United States sources say they're utterly satisfied, supported by Britain and France and some others, that the Syrian government did it. Russia on the other side, and some others are saying that's not clear. Truth is, the UN inspectors had no mandate to determine who did it, but what happened, and they did determine accurately what happened. My position, I might have my private opinion about it, but my position is this: we will get nowhere with the sort of progressive development that I was referring to in our discussion unless we have the facts at our disposal. All sides should really pay laser-like attention to that. We can't get any decent action, any proper policies or credibility unless we first have the facts. If we really don't know exactly who used these weapons, then let's find out. In the meantime, we know that Syria's got over 1,000 tons of these hideous agents, chemical agents, and is declaring them. Let's go ahead and get rid of those. I think that's a good job to do.
Ambassador Butler, we'll leave it there. Thank you so much for joining us. Appreciate it.
Thank you.